while listening to such matters. May I just say one thing to the honorable bench as well, that the private sector, I felt like, kept the room up and the pace faster. Maybe that's the kind of inclusion that we need to do generally in all governmental works, because that was much faster. May I please request you all to join me in welcoming Justice Yahya Afridi of the Honorable Supreme Court, who will be the chair for this session. Co-chair with him would be Dr. Luay Shabne, who is the country representative of UN, and you heard him speak this morning. Joining them for this particular session, which is going to focus on international perspectives, we're going to try and find out in this session how other countries who have either systems similar to us or have slightly different systems, how they have tackled their problem of resource management and population anxiety. Without further ado, my lord, may I request you to, would you like to introduce the panel? Should I do it? The panel? I'll introduce the panel and then you can kick off it. Joining this panel is Dr. Samukele Dube, Executive Director, FP 2030 Secretariat. She's joining us from Washington. We also have Ms. Monica Kerrigan, MPH and Managing Director, MPH Interim Managing Director for North America. We have Dr. Tausif Ahmed, Technical Advisor to UNFPA, who's going to be joining us for this session. And at different occasions, we're going to also have two different personalities, very, very influential people in this sector. Mr. Muhammad Jalal Abbasi, who's a professor of the Department of Demography at University of Tehran, and Mr. Oliver Zimbuke, who's the officer in charge of population development. They're going to be joining. They were not able to join us in person, but have sent video message. Your Lordship, with your permission, may I play the first speaker's video message? Or the chair? The chair, you can take over. The session is yours. We have two video messages. All the other is your session. The chair, Dr. Zubair.
Thank you very much. I expect that we will have a very dynamic and influential session. We have very good experts from across the world, and they try to answer the questions that I have been listening to too many people in this country, why other countries could make it. So without further ado, let me invite my friend Jalal Abbasi to start with setting the scene. Then I will move to Samo, because Samo is going to catch her plane, and then we will distribute our time. Jalal, over to you.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a great pleasure for me to attend this timely, stimulating and inspiring conference. And I was really impressed by the remarks made by the Honorable Chief Justice about population issues in Pakistan and the way that he thinks that population policies should be devised and implemented. And as our dear friend Dr. Luay mentioned, I'll be setting the scene for a lively and a stimulating discussion by my fellow panelists over the next few minutes. I'll be very brief. Let's look at the demography of Muslim populations, that they constitute around 24% of the world's population, with a relatively high population growth. And this population growth has led to a very young age structure of the population in Muslim countries, as a result of which we have demographic dividend. And there has been major social and demographic changes in Muslim countries, including educational advancement, although there exists diversity and some challenges in some of these countries. If we look at the number of Muslims around the world, this is a bit outdated, but close to 1.8 billion Muslims are around the world, including 1.4 billion in Muslim majority countries, meaning in countries that Muslims are more than 50% of the population, and close in the 1970s and before that in 1950s. But since 1970, fertility has started to decline. And by late, 2010, 2015, fertility in largest Muslim countries reduced to close to 2 or below replacement or below 2, while there are some other countries like Afghanistan, Somalia, Chad, and Niger, where fertility is still high between 5 and 7. And interestingly, Pakistan at the moment has a fertility above some of these Muslim majority countries, but again below those countries that having very high fertility. And the question that this conference is addressing is why fertility is so high in some of these countries, particularly Pakistan. This table shows projected population in selected Muslim countries, and I highlighted a few in red. Iran's population will be close to 92 million by 2030, and it will increase to around 100 million, 103 million. In Pakistan, it is projected that population will be around 260 million, increasing to 340 million, means 80 million population will be added between 2030 to 2050. That is, of course, based on the scenario that has been projected. Interestingly, Indonesia, as one of the largest Muslim country, Pakistan will surpass Indonesia by 2050, and this is mainly because of the high fertility that Pakistan is experiencing. Countries have been dealing with population issues, and they devised and implemented different policies, but the question is now, what are the population policy rationales for the 21st century? One of our distinguished colleagues, called Wolfgang Lutz, who has also studied Pakistan's population, argues that population policies in the 21st century should try to efficiently and flexibly manage human resources with respect to achieving the highest long-term well-being of current and future generation of population while fully respecting human rights. And these are the issues that were discussed at the plenary session and other remarks made by other colleagues at this conference. And of course, education is one of the important element of these population policies. He argues that with education, we can, our cognition will change. We will think about the future differently. With education, future aging looks less challenging. Education empowers individuals and societies, and it will lead to a more democratic society. This figure is interesting. I selected Indonesia, Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan. The first figure far in the left shows Iran's population structure by level of education in 2015, and the next one is 2050. The far right is Indonesia. The red figure is illiterate population or proportion of illiterate population within the age structure. The yellow figure is population with primary level of education, and the light blue and dark blue are tertiary, secondary and tertiary education. What we see here in this figure is that Indonesia, Iran, and Turkey invested a lot on education, and the illiterate population in the age structure of the population will be very minor. But in Pakistan, we see in 2015 and also in 2050, a significant proportion of population will be illiterate. And this figure also shows that the mean years of schooling in many of the Muslim countries has been increasing and will be increased by 2050. For example, Malaysia in the top as a Muslim country, that's the mean years of schooling for females aged 20 to 39, has been close to 13, and it will be increasing to 15 years. In Iran, it will be increased from 10 to 13 years. In Turkey, from 9 to 12 years. But in Pakistan, although the level is increasing, still will be below the world average. And it is by 2050, it is estimated to have only 10 years of schooling for women aged 20 to 39. So investment in education means that is a priority. Having looked at these figures, if you compare Iran and Pakistan and the level of education, you see different figures, and that explains why Pakistan, for example, have higher infant mortality rate, or higher total fertility rate, or lower life expectancy, and also higher population growth rate. Iran's experience shows that Iran experienced a phenomenal fertility decline after the Islamic Revolution. By the time that fertility was close to 7 children per woman, and by the mid-1980s, fertility has started to decline, and with the pragmatist view of Muslim religious leaders, they provided family planning program and other facilities that I'll come to in next slide. Fertility declined sharply to around 2 children per woman. Why fertility declined in Iran so rapidly? First, there was a rural development plan. After the revolution, the government tried to provide facilities to the less privileged population, those who were living in rural areas. The majority of people were living in rural areas, and the government, the old sector, tried to provide roads, electricity, telephone, health, and educational system in rural areas. They expanded the health network system. They expanded the education system, particularly for women, and this resulted the reduction of infant mortality rate. It led to women's empowerment, and as a result of which, age at marriage increased. People were thinking about quality versus quantity of children. Small ideal family size ideals were, widespread throughout the country, and as a result of which, there was less demand for children and rise of demand for contraception. Based on that, again, there was easy and widespread access to family planning program services, and thanks to the government commitment and pragmatist view of religious leaders. I was reminded by the seminar that was held in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, yes, in Mashhad, where all bureaucrats, population experts, demographers, economists, and religious leaders came together in Mashhad, and they decided to reintroduce family planning program that was suspended at the time of the Islamic Revolution. You may be interested to know that it was also mentioned by the Honorable Chief Justice that Iran is experiencing low fertility, and recently the government is adopting a pronatalist policy. In 2014, the Supreme Leader issued a statement on pronatalist policy guidelines, and if you look at these 14 different items, they introduced a very comprehensive plan to increase fertility, but at the same time to encourage marriage, to have a comprehensive reproductive and maternal health care, to strengthen family ties and family institution, improve life expectancy, empower the working age population, and many other issues that are part of population, and demographic situation in any country. So the message here is that, again, pronatalist policy that the government is introducing is comprehensive. Now, let me finish my presentation by a few lessons that are learned from Iran and Pakistan. First, as we noted, high population growth stems from high fertility, high infant mortality, and low level of education. There is a need for comprehensive population and development policies, and family planning programs may not be solely effective unless and until we set the scene, we have a context where development is taking place, we may not have an influential and effective family planning program. Of course, advancement of education, particularly for girls, is the key to success. And there are demographic dividends and human resources, both in Iran and Pakistan. As it was mentioned in earlier speeches, there needs to be an investment in human capital formation and management. We not only have to educate people, but we have to provide resources for them to have a better life, and also have access to employment. Consensus and commitment of political and religious leaders, as well as experts on population issues, is a vital element of population policy. So we have to come together, we have to have same ideas, an agreement on the policies that we are making in order to be able to go far, as it was explained by our discussant earlier. And finally, as we all know, policy is a science, or policy making is a science. And we need to hear the voices of demographers, economists, public health practitioners, planners, those who are experts in the field, so that they can design and implement policies. Of course, population is a public issue people can discuss, but if we want to have a sustainable policy, successful policy, we need to learn from successful lessons from other countries, from the experts within the country. That fortunately Pakistan has distinguished demographers who have been working in Pakistan, and of course this conference also can lead to a dialogue, discussion that will be useful. Thank you. I'm finished with my presentation. Thank you very much for.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abbasi. Such a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Jalal. Please don't go to sleep. Stay. I'll come back to you. I know that you are in Canberra, but please, we'll come back to you. Let me move to Samo. Samo, you have to catch your flight. So I will ask you, as Executive Director for FP 2030, to look at Pakistan from the lens of international experiences. And listening to the achievements that has been done by the different provinces in the previous session, where do you see the lessons that could be feeding in the journey of Pakistan? Also, what risks you see that they have to be mindful as they go in the discussion on population management? Thank you. It's up to you, wherever you want.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to be brief. I don't know whether our Chief Justices are still here with all protocol observed, so I'm standing on previous protocol. This is an exciting conference for me, and before I answer your question, I've never been in the presence of so many lawyers and judges. So I don't know whether I'm in trouble or I'm safe. Often when legal practitioners and those who are custodians of the law sit in an esteemed place like this one, it's often about constricting rights in many parts of the world. But I'm glad today that we're talking about expanding rights. And these are the rights for women. So thank you very much for your commitment and for this particular conference. So earlier in the day, we've heard about the numbers. So I'm not going to talk about the numbers because you know them better than myself. Where you stand as one of the largest populous countries in the world, number 5, after India, China, United States of America, Indonesia, and then we've got Pakistan. This situation, ladies and gentlemen, is definitely not unique. So it is essential that we learn from experiences from other countries that are in similar population dynamics. So the professor has just alluded to what those scenarios are. So I lead a global movement that is focused solely on family planning. And that singular focus that we have for family planning allows us not only to place family planning in the context of contraceptives, of implants and IUDs, but in the context of development. And for me, I am privileged today to actually talk about family planning where Pakistani is as an opportunity and not just a challenge. So the previous conversations that I've heard are from the various speakers from other provinces. You have clearly articulated some of the results since 2018, some noble, but some need sharpening and some need acceleration, ladies and gentlemen. But what I really want to zero in on is the issue of impact. If we have made so much input, what is the outcome that we are seeing? Are we seeing the outcome that we envisaged to see way back when such a conference was held in 2020? If the answer is no, this is a time for introspection. So it is crucial that we recognize the population growth not solely as a numerical challenge. So everyone would know from this conference that we're talking about 240 million or 249 million, depending on the source that you actually quote and read, but that this is a multidimensional issue, colleagues, that impacts the country's social fabric and economic stability. I believe what I should offer is what that opportunity is. And I'm going to be brief, otherwise I'll miss my flight. So that opportunity that is presented before us is one simple one. Dr. Sabina, you did quote Nelson Mandela, who is the icon that for me, when I wake up every day, I aspire to live that particular life and ideology. One of the things that he said is that a nation can never be truly free unless women are emancipated from all forms of oppression. So if we are, as a country today, if we want to achieve any ideal that I've heard this morning and in the past 3 days since I've been in Pakistan, our focus should be about women and the status of women in Pakistan. Where are the women in the workforce? You know, I come from a country in South Africa where the majority of the workforce is actually women. You will not get a government tender if the majority of your company is not women. We talk about 51% women involvement. So we need women in the workforce. But ladies and gentlemen, how are they going to get there if they are not educated, if they do not have the right skills? So our sole focus, and apologetically so, as a country, is to ensure girls' education is a top priority. Is to ensure that women and honorable judges and the Chief Justice here, that women are safe when they decide to join the workforce and go out of the house. That is important for us. So the declarations that are going to come out of this conference would be about political commitment. For me, even it would be nice and noble to say political commitment, but it is not complete if I don't talk about political commitment that is multidimensional. Because we make policies based out of need, and Pakistan is not short of those policies. When you've got a need, you make a policy. But now that you've got a policy, you need to break it down into tangible activities. Those activities are not enough, ladies and gentlemen, if they are not followed by results. Because if you're not getting the results, you need to circle back to understand, why am I not getting results? But results, again, are not enough. Even, especially as philosophers say, it is not enough to do. You must see results. And for me, it is imperative that we take this as a matter of national agency. The agency that I'm talking about is that political expediency around population development in Pakistan. Where are the ministries that are in charge of planning? Where are the ministries that are in charge of gender? The finance ministers, they need to be here because this agenda is bigger than the Department of Health. It is important for us to ensure that as we execute this mandate that is before us, we talk about integration of the population department and the Ministry of Health department, because that is important for us to progress forward. Because I represent FP 2030, I'm not just going to stop at the macro imperative around women's empowerment. I will also talk about what family planning will do for Pakistan. We know that. But where are the gaps? And you ask me a question, what should we be doing as a country, and where is the greatest opportunity? Sirs and ladies and gentlemen, the greatest opportunity that you have in Pakistan is actually from the number of births that you have every year, about 6.4 million births. And these are 6.4 million women who, when they leave a facility, they could live with a method of family planning. I was privileged to go to one of the major tertiary hospitals in the country where I saw dozens of women who were attending antenatal care. Some of them had just delivered. And the concerted efforts of the frontline workers who are making sure that all women who are coming out of that facility know about family planning. They choose a method of their choice and they make sure that they do a follow-up. One of the strategies that we have as FP 2030 is to normalize family planning. We spoke earlier about normalize it like Coca-Cola. I don't know here how your favorite drink, but normalizing family planning for me means that men, young people, everyone should talk about family planning. Says, you should feel comfortable to ask me what method of family planning I use, even though maybe it's abstinence, right? But you should feel comfortable without any judgment, without any walls. If we want to get to where we are going as a country, I believe we should normalize family planning. Presidents and prime ministers should stand in podiums and talk about family planning. Taxi drivers should talk about family planning. That's how we normalize it as part of everyday life. The second opportunity that you have is about integration of services, ensuring that there are no missed opportunities, whether somebody is coming for vaccination, whether somebody is coming for diabetes, whether somebody is coming for high blood pressure medication. Integration is key. I read this morning that about over 60% of the Pakistani population is young, below 30. I don't know in this room how many people are under 30. And I'm hoping that is 60% of us. That is another opportunity. We cannot do this without young people. And ladies and gentlemen, again, for us what is important is that we need to collaborate. We need partnership. I'm not going to miss my flight, but I will not leave the podium without the call to action. Lastly, dear judges, for the call to action, the courts are custodians for security and safety, especially at an individual and community level. Thank you for the work that you do around this, because that, when it's enforced, would make sure that women participate in the workforce. That's the call to action. For the international NGOs who are here, whether it's IPAS, PSI, JAPECO, please, when you are programming any next program, you should arouse your intellectual curiosity. You should never have this strategic ambiguity, because that expediency calls for business unusual. That is my call. When you go to that next meeting, rethink and rethink again how you design your programs. To the donors who are here, we've met FCD or Sarah, I don't know whether they're still in the room, USAID, Global Financing Facility, and the World Bank. Where do we put our money? We want to make sure that the partnerships that we are getting on the ground are actually getting things to happen each and every day. And the UN family, thank you for pushing the agenda around One Health, One UN, One Health, because that provides strategic focus for the country. But I want to just thank people like Yasmin and people like Dr. Sabina. I don't know who has got the power and the authority to make some of the things happen. But people like Yasmin and Dr. Sabina have brought their brains and their hearts into this cause. What they need is hands to execute. So they need more hands in their units, in their departments, so that they can execute this mandate. You know, I see Dr. Sabina is working 300% of the time. So I am using this privilege that I have before I miss my flight, that we need to make sure there is more capacity for us to execute. Otherwise, life, I believe, is never worth living if we don't live for something that is bigger than ourselves. There are many people who have left this room, but believe you me, change happens from a few dedicated individuals who decide we are going to change the world. And you and I are going to work together through collaborative partnerships to change the course of history for Pakistan. Are you going to be counted, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you.
Dr. Dubey, thank you for that passionate comment. May I say that when you said how many people in the room are under 18, a few in the front row almost raised their hands and then put it back. So,
all right. So now we are a bit relaxed. Monica, you have 3 to 5 minutes. Can you please share some lessons from FP 2020 and FP 2030 that you could add to what Samo has just mentioned? Thank you.
Let's keep on, oh, here, I'll just get closer. Thank you. Honorable Chief Justice and Justices, Dr. Lue, thank you so much. I'm a coach. I've been a family planning expert almost all my life. I spent 30 years, mostly in Africa and Asia. And today, I want to thank you. At the London Summit, I was working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Mrs. Gates was there, and the government of Pakistan stood up and said, we are going to set the pace. We are going to make the commitment. And they did. And here we are, FP 2030. Yes, give them a round of applause. I landed here 5 days ago, and I look at the people in this room, and we have been working, they have been working night and day and night, to make that commitment happen. That passion, like Dr. Samu said, it's in their hearts and in their minds. Now we have to figure out a way to turbocharge it, right? Our jobs are to get it up there. I always tell people, let's fall in love with problems. Do not fall in love with a solution. It leads you in the wrong direction. Right now, we are at almost 30% modern contraception. We want to be much higher than that, right? We have an impact gap. Each one of our provinces has set their goal. They have set their target. It's not, we didn't tell them what to do. They set their target. They have their costed implementation plans. Now, how do we turn those CIPs into blueprints of change, transformational change? And we have to begin to rethink how to disrupt. So today I want to talk a little bit about, and I want to thank Professor Jalal, because he started us off. I had the fortune to live in Indonesia for 5 years. I worked at the BKKBN. Like Pakistan, Indonesia has a Ministry of Health, and they have a Ministry of Family Planning and Coordination. That's where I worked, and we worked together. But I want you to think about this, because I think it's important to note that you have 12 million users of modern contraception in your country. Indonesia has 30 million users, so they double it, right? You're at 30% modern contraception, they're at 60% modern contraception. So they are much higher than you. How did they get there? Let's take a look. One is the first leader of the BKKBN was a sociologist. He was a communicator. For him, it was all about, and that's why we talked about Coca-Cola, how do we democratize family planning? And so when Samu told you about the taxi driver, Samu, have a very safe flight. Let's give her one hand of applause there. What did Indonesia do? Dr. Haryono, who headed the BKKBN, he made it a top priority. He made it a top priority for the president, for the governors, for the mayors. Even if you were a principal in the school, every single government worker made family planning a priority, and guess what? They aligned. They aligned on a few big things. What does that mean? It means that in their communities, they talked about family planning. In every town hall meeting and every board meeting, it was a part of their life. So I was telling Samu, when I got into a taxi every single time in Jakarta, to get from the airport to my home usually took about 2.5 to 3 hours. It's a big city, 25 million people. Guess what? They would ask me my name. They would ask me what I did. They would ask me where I worked. By the end of the conversation, every single person asked me what contraceptive method I used. It's popular. No, it's desensitized. Normalize family planning. Talk about it. Talk about it at home, on the TV, everywhere. It really makes a difference. Now I have to go back to my talking points. UHC, universal healthcare coverage. It is super important, and that's where also Indonesia turbocharged. 90% of their 260 million people have UHC, universal health coverage, and it covers family planning, labor and delivery, preventive care. So that's another thing. Dr. Samu talked about integration. You have more births in your country than Indonesia because your fertility rate is higher. Use that as an opportunity. More women go to hospitals, are delivering in hospitals than ever before. Optimize, optimize, optimize. One of the things you have done, I'm so proud of you, you've almost eradicated polio. You're right there. Give yourselves the hand of that's historical. How can you use those field workers and community workers? I have a dream. We could put them to work for M&H, maternal and newborn health, family planning. They are right there, right now, in our communities. Let's shift their work, expand their work, and let them continue the great works that they're doing. Let's see, a few other things. Data. Man, I could never coach without data. I coach basketball. I coach in family planning. You need data to compete. To be best in class, you better have that data. I see a lot of data. What I don't see is people using the data. Measurement matters. Do not collect data that you're not going to use. Get rid of some of the data that you're collecting. It's heavyweight. If you use the data, then keep that data. But those pieces of data that you're not using, it's one of those learnings. We have to fail fast. In our field, we don't fail fast. We keep on holding on to things, and that keeps us down. So I'm going to stop there, because you have another question later on, and then I'll get to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With these two exceptional, passionate ladies, we will see if Tawsif can compete with that. Dr. Tawsif, we would like you to speak about some country experiences that you have scanned so far and see what Pakistan can learn from these experiences. Over to you.
Thank you indeed. This is a great opportunity, and also I'm very honored to be among all of you. It's my pleasure to be part of this session. Actually, when I started to think about the issues that you have raised with us, is that we have been referring to 4 countries which we learn from: Turkey, Iran, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. Now, why are we referring those countries again and again, and what are we learning from them? And what did they really do to make us feel that they should be looked forward to? Before I do that, let me get back to 2 indicators which are known to be outcome and impact indicators. fertility decline is an impact indicator, and CPR, which is contraceptive prevalence rate, is something that we are trying to do for the last many, many years. Turkey has a CPR of a decline by 40% in 2 decades. And CPR basically means contraceptive prevalence rate among married women. And currently they are at 70%, rising from only 40% about 2 decades ago. Iran is the most remarkable, dramatic example. The CPR has currently about 60% and rose from 27% in just 12 years to 56%, which basically means they had a very rapid increase in CPR in just 12 years. Bangladesh is a remarkable example in front of Pakistan. Bangladesh had CPR only 5% in mid-70s, and it rose to 43% by late 90s. But that means in 25 years, they 7 times increase there. 8 times increase their CPR. And Indonesia, their CPR was only 27% in mid-70s, and it rose to 64% in just recent years, which basically means each of these countries took only 2 decades to really bring a change in the adoption of contraceptives, and that was mostly in mid-70s and mid-80s. Even though Pakistan's population program was there since 1960s, but our cases they were very different. Turkey has already reached what we call replacement level fertility. Replacement fertility means they have 2.1 births, 2.2 births per family, and which basically means that each couple is replacing by their two children. Turkey reached that in 2018. Iran reached that 2005. Bangladesh reached just recently 2017, and Indonesia reached that also in 2017. That means all those 4 countries have achieved their replacement level fertility. That means their growth rate is almost very normal, and they can now dedicate attention to more of the production and welfare of the families. Now, what did they really do? I have gone through their research, I have gone through their documents, and I found basically 4 things. First, all 4 countries, they basically passed legislation in the parliament to support and reflect political commitment on family planning. Passing a law in parliament in Turkey in 1965 and 1989 in Iran. Bangladesh formalized its population policy in 1976. Indonesia formalized its comprehensive policy in early 1970s. So these are the basic 4 countries, and they did their work in early 70s and 80s. Secondly, they evolved a very comprehensive universal access plan and availability of services. Now, what does that mean? This basically means, 1, they had open commitment. Open commitment means the parliament used to discuss, and every media in those countries used to discuss about family planning and small family, and try to encourage people about having a small family. In Turkey, they mobilized each of the health facility across the board. 100% facilities of health facilities provided family planning in Turkey. And similarly in Bangladesh. Similarly in Iran. Similarly in Bangladesh and Indonesia, they had community-based services mobilizing family planning at the doorsteps of the households. And finally, Indonesia focused on strengthening their healthcare systems, which Pakistan has yet to do in order to improve the service delivery. Another point was very important was the motivation campaign. Iran had a very comprehensive campaign on basically three elements. Birth spacing of 3 to 4 years, 1. Secondly, do not have a pregnancy before 18 and no pregnancy after 35. So they limited their reproduction between 15 and 35, which is 20 years. And also they promoted not more than 3 children. So this was grounded and bombarded in the families across Iran for many, many years. Similarly, all countries have educated women on benefits of low fertility and their misgivings about fears of family planning and modern methods. Son preference was the main issue in Bangladesh, and they addressed this issue critically to reduce their family size and also empower them to hold two child families. Similarly, Indonesia focused on community workers. It was Indonesia and Bangladesh which faced serious problems in lowering fertility about 10 to 15 years back. What they did was massively invest in innovative activities. That was in 2005 onwards, which basically involved engaging communities, engaging small NGOs and private sector to enhance the access of family planning to the community level. And finally, they had a very strict monitoring system, which we lacked very seriously in Pakistan. Bangladesh established their own monitoring system to track not only the contraceptive distributed, but also how women are using it, and also what's the impact they have on their birth spacing. Number third, modern methods were provided in all 4 countries, and state in each country took responsibility of promoting modern methods in the countries. Turkey in 1965 issued a law mandated all health facilities to provide family planning. Iran had a massive network of facilities which basically integrated family planning in primary health care. Bangladesh integrated every facility in MCH services, which is basically maternal and child health. And Bangladesh and Indonesia basically focused on all health facilities and clinics to provide family planning. Just 1 minute. 2 more points. There were 2 issues that in Turkey and Indonesia did. IUCD, which is basically intra-unitary advice, was heavily invested in Turkey and Iran, and injectables in Bangladesh. And Indonesia was also injectables and implants, which basically means that long-acting methods were the main investment that was done by these countries. And finally, point number 4, female education. These 4 countries heavily invested in female education for the last 20 years, which basically means women should be getting maximum education, and they will be getting a higher return in terms of age at marriage, reducing their desire for family size and self-preferences. These 4 elements are the key that brought change in those 4 countries. The rest I will talk to you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Persif. I am sure, this is the DG, it's not me. I am sure that most of what he said, we know. Maybe new for some honorable judges, but for the practitioners from the bureaucrats, they are very well aware of that. I think the problem here is the will to make. The enforcement. There is a lot of policies, a lot of laws and legislations, but the enforcement and the implementation is the thing that we would like to learn more, because this is what could help us. The second point which I would like to make, there is no ideal model that we can borrow. We have to know this. Every country has its own context. We could match from Iran something, from Turkey something, from Indonesia something, but let me say one thing. This issue of handling family planning is cross religions, cross cultural. So we should not limit ourselves to specific countries. Jalal has mentioned and showed us that the trend of fertility is for all countries. I am sure, I hope, Honorable Justice, that this is Chatham House rules that we can speak freely and frankly. I wouldn't imagine that you would like to see the pattern of performance of Pakistan going with other countries who are under conflict, or other poor countries like Somalia, like Afghanistan. I am sure that you would like to see your country positioned somewhere else with the middle-income countries, that countries who have the rich inventor of brains that Pakistan has. So I think we need to think more on the how. Let me go back to Jalal before he go to bed. Jalal, from your experience, and please focus on Tehran since you are Iranian, what is the most powerful actions that made the success of Iran? In 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Louis. Please let me. I really learned a lot from our fellow panelists, the remarks that they made. In Iran, interestingly, in post-revolution, in beginning of the 1980s, there was a cessation of family planning program. So they said, okay, this is a program that was introduced in the past by Pahlavi regime, and this is against religion. That was the idea that they came at the beginning. But interestingly, the point that you made, that census and data is important, once the 1986 census or the result was published, the government noted that there has been a large population increase in the country. Schools were almost, crowded by the number of children who were born in post-revolutionary Iran. And the conservative government, the then conservative government, realized that they have to do something about the population increase or the large population increase in the country. Interestingly, the cabinet took a vote, and it was won by only one single member of the cabinet, 51% of the cabinet, and they started to reintroduce family planning program. But interestingly, before taking action on family planning programs, they started to expand health network system, as I mentioned. They started to expand education and encourage women to participate in education and secondary education and higher education. They established universities in many provinces, medical universities in many provinces, and that changed the context where people were living. So it was a people-driven demand that people became aware, women wanted less children, more contraception, and government provided the services. And at the same time, practitioners, medical doctors, demographers, and it's interesting that the then Minister of Health, Professor Ali Reza Marandi, wrote a letter to Ayatollah Khomeini and said, this is the situation that we are facing, and what should we do about family planning program or providing contraception? And they said this is justified, and as far as the health of the people is concerned, we have to provide health services, including family planning program services, for the population control to be, to be managed, for population to be managed in a way, along with the resources that we have. That was the message that we learned from the policymakers in Tehran.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Jalal. We are, of course, very most welcome to continue with us. But if you feel sleepy, you are released. Let me go back to Monica. Monica,
so with your permission, we have one video as well. May we play the video for Mr. Oliver Zambuku at the end?
Thank you. Monica, let me focus more. I would like you to zoom on two things. The first one, what are the avenues that Pakistan can tap on for partnership, global interaction to help them in the journey? Second, knowing that Pakistan is a diverse place and there is no one size fits all, what innovative models that could help in addressing the issue? For example, Balochistan, they have scattered population. In KP, maybe they have more conservative environment, and so on and so forth. Also in 3 minutes.
So I think I'm going to combine the two questions, because I think when we look at each province, one idea might be to do public-private partnerships and innovation challenges. So have each province fall in love with their problems, right? And do innovation challenges that hone in on that problem. For example, we saw commodity security, a huge problem in each province. No product, no program, right? And yet it continues to exist. So how can we work with each province to try to solve the commodity gap? I think putting together public-private partnerships, looking at commodity security, would be a huge difference. Right there, you might be able to solve 20% of that impact gap. The second area is female workforce. In my experience, I have never seen a country win the family planning and maternal and newborn health war without a female workforce. Skilled, compassionate, confident. That female workforce is going to drive that change. Client, provider, together. Trust with the government and the private sector. I don't think it can work with a very OBGYN male skilled workforce. I haven't seen it. I may be wrong, but if that's true, and that's my hypothesis, then we need innovation quick. Because how will we get the lift? You have to bend the curve, right? To bend the curve, we need community health workers right now. That means we have new ways to train, new ways to get them updated and skilled. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would do is innovation on social norms. And take a look at your Muslim faith-based organization. They exist everywhere. How do we meet the needs of our communities, not just by providers, but also by our Islamic communities? Muhammadiyah and NU in Indonesia made all the difference in the world. Thank you.